Columbia College. Lynn and Angie were going to be there. And when they decided to come over, we thought, well, let's make it available to anyone there. And if people aren't there, we're going to have copies available in the president's offices if people wanted to take them. And I think the YFA and some of the organizations will probably purchase one themselves. In the future, we're going to look at actually streaming our meetings, so people can actually watch live from anywhere. It's not interactive, but they can see it. So we're looking into that. I've had a lot of experience with teleconferencing. One of the districts I was at, the college itself had, I think, the whole Mojave Desert, all the way up to Bishop, all the way down to, it's huge. And so we use video conferencing a lot. And one of the things that's important is no sidebars, because if there's more than one person talking, no one can hear what's going on. It'll be very difficult. So try to keep paper turning and potato chip eating too.
Soft food only.
And let's see. We'll only have the mic turned on for the public comments if anybody there wants to make a public comment. Otherwise, we'll mute it so we won't hear what is going on there. And this is a very full study session for the board. We have an ESL presentation, and then we have a board, funding formula overview, and kind of a fiscal picture where we are right now. And then we have our lawyer Eileen is joining us for some things that is really very specifically for the board, what we can talk about in closed session and conflict of interest issues and things like that. If you could hold your questions till the presentations are done, board members, I think we'll be able to move through. We've got pads there for if you want to jot down your questions or anything. And we should have time to answer. And if we want more time with fiscal, we can do that. And we'll be doing it for sure in June. We'll do something in May if you want to. All right, thank you.
Any questions from Columbia?
No, they're muted.
Okay. Oh, all right.
They can hear us. They can hear us, right?
I'd like to call this meeting to order, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and we have a very minimal flag in this corner there.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we need to work on that for our next teleconferencing meeting.
Yeah.
We need a flag up there, and we need
Yes, we do. Good point.
them to join us in the pledge. Okay, at this point, we will move to public comments. Can Columbia hear us?
Yes, they can. Excuse me, Columbia.
I don't think they can hear us.
Did they mute it?
Would you wave if you can see us?
Not you.
No.
Hey, what?
Turn on the sound.
Hello.
You need to be able to hear us.
I
Yeah, we
hear you guys really well.
So we're at. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. We're at the point for public comments. Are there any public comments from Columbia?
So far, no.
Okay, that's fine. And are there any public comments from Modesto Junior College? All right, then we will move.
Columbia.
Well, we had none from Columbia and none from Modesto. So let's move on to our presentation. The English as a second language presentation. So I can go to Julian. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm just going to take like 30 seconds to introduce my program and presenter. So anyway, thank you so much, Madam Board of Trustees, Chancellor Harmon, for this opportunity to have, we're now calling ourselves the English Language Program, to present big transformations that have occurred in the program, both in the non-credit sequence and then also beginning this fall in the now being called English Language Instruction for College, ELIC. And but I want to introduce, I have two other members from the EL program, Pam Kapitsky and Sarah Berger, due in May. We were going to have our main staff member who staffs the brand new Welcome Center here, Mary Calderon, but she couldn't be here. We are going to have a student speak as part of the presentation, but I'm going to have Ruth present her. So this is Ruth Lumen, and she, as I said earlier, is the powerhouse, really, of the EL program. She is currently my faculty coordinator for the non-credit English for Life and Work program, and has done a phenomenal job in creating outreach and offsite courses. We're like more than doubling our offsite courses just next week. So, Ruth.
All right, thank you. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to talk with you about our programs, but more importantly, really about our students, I think, of whom we are most proud. So, as you know, we are the MJC English Language Instruction Program, or the English Language Department, and we have recently opened up the English Language Learner Welcome Center, and so, where do I need to point with the clicker? Anywhere?
Yeah, it might not be the right button.
Okay, great. Okay. So I'm only going to take an hour of your time, but I'm just kidding. I know we only have a limited amount of time, so I'm going to talk about our agenda here. We'll talk about why we exist in the big picture, look at some community demographics, how we are using the English Language Learner Welcome Center to reach into the community and reach these demographics. We'll talk about our English language instruction programs and how we meet the needs of language learners in our community. We'll have Esmeralda Felix here, who will share the student perspective. And then we will have a short closing and open it up for questions. So let's go ahead and just get into it with Stanislaus County. As probably all of you know, about 1/5 of our residents identify themselves as being foreign-born. So about 1 out of every 5 people that you meet was born in another country. And as you can imagine, with that kind of demographic comes language learners. And about 40% of our county, according to U.S. Census Bureau data, in 2012, they identify themselves as speaking English as not their native language. Stanislaus County is actually one of 8 refugee-impacted counties in California. And as you can imagine, with these newcomers, with language learners, employers are looking for employees with communication skills, writing skills, and they are actually stating English as a skill that they want to see in their employees. And in our community, unfortunately, we are rated by Forbes as the 5th least educated city in the United States. And this has a huge impact on our students' educational attainment and therefore their income attainment. In Stanislaus County, 52% of our residents have a high school diploma, GED, or less, and only 16% have a bachelor's degree or higher. And this has an impact on their ability to care for their families. In addition, as you all know, we've been talking a lot about equity gaps, not only at MJC, but there's a lot of discussion about income inequity within our communities. And Chris Benner, who is a professor of economic development at UC Davis, has written a couple of books about this issue. And a number of articles in newspapers and magazines across the country have noted that California has one of the highest disparities in the nation when it comes to income gaps or income inequity. And more than ever, education matters. And I would then say language education matters, especially to our constituents in our community here. Let's talk a little bit about how equity and what equity looks like for language learners here at MJC. Equity has always meant high standards, great teaching. It doesn't mean a lowering of standards, but for our language learners, what they need in order to bridge the gap in their learning is really time. They also need language instruction. In order to succeed in college, you cannot pick up this kind of academic language on the street. It has to be instructed, it has to be taught, and that's what we do here at MJC. In addition, another way in which we try to bridge the equity gap with our language learners at the college is to provide guided and directed assistance in their access and in their matriculation process to the college. As you can imagine, if you are a language learner, it is daunting enough to get into college. But if you're a newcomer also to the country and your family is not educated, they've never been to college, the process, the system, the culture itself is very, very foreign. So what we've done is we have tried through the use of adult education block grants is to open what we call the ELL Welcome Center, or the English Language Learner Welcome Center. And one of our former students, Esmeralda, who is here today, she will talk about her work at the Language Learner Welcome Center. And we opened this last July, and we had a great celebration, an open house in which we invited a number of community and campus constituents, because we really feel that it's important to make the connection with the community and draw people into the college. English Language Learner Welcome Center, basically what happens in there is people like Esmeralda, people like Mary, help students come in, explain the college application process. It's all online. There's a lot of English there, and it is often very confusing, right, Esmeralda? And so we work one-on-one with students to get that done. We also help them with any enrollment issues or enrollment problems that they might have, work with them on assessment, course registration, give them some general orientation to the college, and our student success specialist will also come in and provide some informal advising as well. And so if you can kind of imagine yourself, this is probably a low intermediate to intermediate reading task here. And imagine if you were trying to go to school in China and your family's livelihood depended on getting your education, and going into a college website and having to decipher and work through all of this information. It is a really daunting task. And so that is why this is a picture of Mary Calderon at our Welcome Center, literally welcoming a student and making sure that she gets the information that she needs about the college in order to access services and education here. In addition to those services that Mary and Esmeralda provide in the Welcome Center, we also offer workshops that are of interest to our language learners. So for example, we have workshops on financial aid, how to access your MJC PiratesNet account, which is really quite difficult for a number of students. We've had college and community resource fairs so that students know what services are available to them. And last fall, we also had a citizenship and documentation workshop for students. These are just a few photos. I think you've got more photos and some feedback from some of these workshops and from some of these events in your packet that you've been given. In addition to the Welcome Center activities, we also try to build partnerships with our community constituents, and we also try to build partnerships within the college. For example, the Great Valley Museum is offering a science night, and they're gearing it specifically towards language learners, and you have that flyer in your packet as well. In addition, we've initiated a scholarship through World Relief, a refugee resettlement agency here in Modesto, and together, we have kind of worked together to raise money to provide scholarships to their recently arrived refugees. And those recently arrived refugees are funneled actually directly into our English for Life and Work program. We are working with Davis High Language Institute and helping those students who are newcomers as well transition into the college. And we also work with other organizations within the community, and in order to provide our students references, for example, for legal help or for building their credit so that they can figure out how to get money to pay for education. In addition, as part of our Adult Education Block Grant Consortium, we have had the ability to go to some professional conferences. One was called the CATESOL Conference. It stands for California Teachers of English Speakers of Other Languages. And a year ago, 5 of us went to the conference and then came back and had our own mini conference here at MJC to share highlights. And we invited also other language instructors and language instruction professionals from the community to come to that in order to build greater networking. We'll have another one this next spring, and you have handouts for that as well in your packet. Off-site courses, I know Jillian mentioned some off-site courses, and recently about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, we opened an off-site course in Salida and an off-site course at Orville Wright in order to bring the college basically out into neighborhoods, out into communities that wouldn't normally come to the college. And recently, as Jillian mentioned, we are opening up 3 new classes that have either already started or will start in the next week or so. One at Valley Home near Oakdale and one in Hickman, or actually one at Valley Home and 2 in Hickman. Yeah, sorry about that. And what's great about off-site courses is that the college is coming into communities in which the students or the people there in those communities had no idea oftentimes that a college even existed. And so being able to make that connection with students who wouldn't normally even come here. We also hope to open more classes in the community. We've got various sites in green, as you can see, in various stages of interest. One of our off-site course coordinators is very excited about the course happening at his school, Orville Wright, and says, we have parents engaged in learning English. Conversations are happening at home with elementary students about doing homework and going to college. And so to me, that's really exciting. Yeah, when I go out to Orville Wright, I think this is where the college should be. So anyway, it's very exciting. So language instruction. Our job as an EL department is to provide language instruction, the kind of language instruction that will help students meet a variety of goals. And if you can imagine, language learning is actually like climbing Mount Everest. And right, Esmeralda? And you kind of start out at base camp, and this is really our English for Life and Work program. And according to research, this is what would be called basic interpersonal communication skills. So it takes about 1 to 2 years of intensive language instruction. This is the language used most often in everyday life and work and community situations. Our English for Life and Work program courses include instruction in reading, writing, listening, speaking, grammar, vocabulary, all related to work, civics, and community. And it would be similar if you were to go into a Spanish 101 or a Spanish 102 or 103 or really even 104 class. And once you finish those classes, essentially, you've got, in order to access college transfer level courses, you have actually a much steeper climb. Academic language instruction is extremely challenging. And typically, according to research, it takes about 2 to 5 years of instruction. In our English language instruction for college program, we offer credit and transferable courses. And these are also taught reading, writing, listening, speaking, and grammar. And the grammatical and the vocabulary accuracy is really important at the academic level. So that gets much more stressed in this program. And it would be if you were to compare yourself finishing all of your sort of lower division foreign language courses going into upper division courses in a foreign language. That's basically what our English language instruction for college program is. In our English for Life and Work program, we have 6 levels. During the day, they are taught in 8 weeks, so a student can theoretically finish 2 levels within 1 semester. Our English language instruction for college program is 4 levels, so a student can finish in theoretically 4 semesters, and they can go directly into 101. We have, as Jillian mentioned, we have made a lot of changes to our academic English language instruction program. On the left, as you can see, that's our current program. There are a number of levels, and they stop at just before developmental English, and we offer no transfer level courses. Whereas in our new program, we offer 4 levels of reading and composition instruction, leading directly into English 101. Students can also take integrated grammar courses as well as listening and speaking courses. Many of them do because they realize that they need that intensive language instruction. And so that balances out their language acquisition, their language proficiency. And so as you can see, we have courses that lead directly into English 101, directed specifically at our language learners on campus, of which I understand they're about 17%, according to Nora Serenello from a couple of years ago, who identify themselves as speaking another native language other than English. These courses parallel our English program. So, and we are working in concert with our English instructors as well to make sure that we are normed and working together. All right, I think I will have Esmeralda come up at this point and tell you a little bit about her experience before we close.
Okay, so good afternoon. I'm sorry for my appearance. I was taking a yoga class earlier. So my name is Esmeralda Felix, as Ruth said. I've been here since 2009. I started with the non-credit classes. So right from the bottom, I was born in LA, well, Los Angeles. And when I was 8 years old, my parents took the decision to move to Mexico. So I grew up there. When I was 18, I decided to move here. So that's when I started the non-credit classes. That little English that I used to have when I was 8 was gone. So I needed to start from the very bottom, no English. My Spanish is really good, but my English, I don't know what. So I took all the non-credit classes. I took the academic classes, and that helped me a lot to pursue my goal, which was to get into the medical field, a career in the medical field. So with those courses, academic one, I was able to get started into English 50, which for me was a lot because I knew that English 49 was challenging or is challenging for many ESL students. And I also had a lot of classmates like me taking those courses, and they scored into English 101, and some of them already are in advanced state, graduating from a nursing career. But I just stayed here because I needed to take to work and come to school, so that's why it took me longer, like time. So I was, well, let me go back, sorry. I am so nervous. So what happened with me is when I was done with all the English classes, I was hired to tutor at the writing center. Then Ruth recommended me to work with Mary Calderon to help at the Welcome Center. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm helping the students, and I'm done with all the prerequisites I'm already accepted into the respiratory program. So I'm gonna be starting this fall. So it's a very, very nice accomplishment, and it's been challenging, but I'm accepted and I'm gonna start there. So for me, it's been a great experience working at the writing center because I feel like connected with the students. There is a lot of students that are like as I were, that they need to speak English, they don't know where to go. Sometimes they go to the wrong place, they give them bad information, and I wish at the time when I started there was someone that could have helped me so it could have taken me short time to study, to be done with my prerequisites. So that's why I'm there. I'm helping the students to complete applications, to push them, like to keep going, don't give up. And it seems to be helping because last month we had a presentation in an off-campus class to have them to come to take the class. And we had like 60 students wanted to take the class when we only have space for 30 students. So that's why we they opened a second class in Hickman. So I'm very proud of the Welcome Center and all the job the English instructors that do for us, because they give us the tools so we can succeed. So thank you for everything. And thank you for the people who give some money to
So really quickly, just in closing, you have this handout actually in your packet, but I think in closing what we want to say is, to you who are on the board, to you who are in power, I hope you see our students like we see them. They are assets. They are assets to our college, they are assets to our community, and they're the best. I always start crying when I say this. And that is how we feel about them. It is our privilege every day to walk the language journey with them. So thank you. And you also have a story in your packet as well of a student from our program who has recently won an award. So something else for you to read. Thank you.
Are you going to take questions?
I think so.
People that have questions?
I noticed where you have your centers, county, and that one area that was missing was the website, where we have a very large Hispanic population. I was wondering if there's any progress or goals to get those centers out on the website.
So I know that, so as part of a consortium of language education providers, I understand from George Boudroukas about a year ago, or maybe a year and a half ago, he met with, I think her name was Pam Abel, with Modesto City Schools. And I think they discussed this need, and I think it was decided at that time that Modesto City Schools wanted to do something in those areas. And so...
Yeah, on the website, okay.
Right. And really our off-site classes happen through sometimes word of mouth. Sometimes coordinators hear that this option is available and approach us. We probably could do, push ourselves out there more. But I will tell you, it takes quite a bit of energy and time to get something off-site going.
Like a year of meetings and organization, and you have to figure out how to test all the students off-site and just get them registered and everything.
Yeah.
But also, I think what Luke is speaking towards is within the consortium that we're a part of, there's a respect of not overlapping service areas, and so that might be part of it. But that was sort of new information for me, so
I can tell you more about it later.
Is the outreach program part of your program in going to the other schools around the county, in our district?
I think we've made it part of what we do in the Welcome Center, just because outreach is part of the AEBG, or the Adult Education Block Grant Consortium mandate, really, is to meet the needs of language learners out in the community who may or may not know of the services or the classes that are available to them.
The block grant you're talking about is where's the funding?
it's the Adult Education Block Grant, yeah, the AEB.
Okay.
It was 86, and
Yeah.
now it's 83.
I have some questions, and I'd first like to start off with what Darren was saying. Modesto City Schools is only one school district. I represent Patterson, Newman, Grayson. They have very high needs for your services. And so, be fair.
Well, we're not trying to, I mean, we're certainly interested in, we don't want to step on anybody's toes, but if there's a need, to us, like you saw, our concern as a department is about equity within the community and equity gaps. And language education empowers students, empowers our communities.
So, in just getting an overview idea of your program, I'd be curious, let me name up a few things and then you can address them, like how many students are we talking about? How many FTESs are generated? How many, just sort of the financial aspects of it.
We can get that information.
Yes, but I can get that information.
Well, what's the ballpark? I mean, are we talking about, how many instructors are there?
So, well, we have 4 full-time instructors, and they're mostly teaching in what will now be the ELIT program, the credit program. And then in terms of our non-credit sequence, it's mostly taught by adjunct, and we have probably about 10 in the pool. We're growing. We need to grow, and we just hired a new adjunct instructor actually on Friday, I think it was.
Yeah.
And
He's starting next Tuesday.
yeah, and with the new non-credit, the emphasis on non-credit at the state, they've once again sort of emphasized that the minimum qualifications to teach non-credit are different than credit, and that did open up our opportunity to hire. We think he'll be really good.
Any idea of how many students? I mean, not just FDS, but how many students have you certified?
We offer 16 sections, I think, in the credit program. I don't have the numbers right off the top of my head, but about 30 students in each class. And we offer
12,
over 20 now.
Yeah, 20, well, with the outreach,
Non-credit?
24
Yeah.
non-credit, yeah.
With about 30 to 35 students in those classes.
That'd be like,
Do you coordinate?
600.
The non-credit is positive attendance, but, yeah, the one roadblock that we have, I have the attention of the board, is, we have tried to get IT to put progress indicators in for our, positive attendance, and we haven't gotten that, and it makes it very difficult to, easily let students flow through the
Yeah.
sequence, and, because it's positive attendance, we don't get any success or data, nothing.
We do keep that ourselves in-house because it's important to us, but it is very, very difficult to,
The chancellor's making notes, so you'll get, I think you'll get progress on that.
Are you going to coordinate with the March 18th Hispanic Leadership Conference?
Oh, are we going to participate? We are going to be, I think, connecting with, who is it Shirley Miranda?
Who's with the Hispanic.
Yeah,
Shirley and Teresa Rojas are.
So we're going to be working with them to provide information at the conference on the programs.
Because that provides us with great exposure. We get over 700 kids, and the majority of them come from the west side.
Oh, okay.
But-
So maybe we need to have coffee and we can figure out how to.
A riverbank area, but Patterson area brings the most students than anyone. And it's hard to try to get the outlying schools to participate. I talk to the teachers and they say, oh, yes, we're going to send students, but we never. So my thinking is that as part of an outreach program is that it doesn't take much to make one presentation to the school board where just like us, if you come to us, we kind of set priorities. And to me, if you approach the board of trustees,
We can do that.
I think it would encourage them to encourage their faculty to send students to this program because it's an outstanding program. They get a lot of information about going to college. So,
Well, I would love to work with anyone who would be willing to connect me with school board members or for schools in other areas to, you know, initiate more off-site classes.
We'll get that information, I'll make sure.
Yeah. Find out what
If you
the,
want to go to one in my district, I'll go with you.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, because it's just the opportunity to
Oh,
get on the
no,
agenda,
we need
to get on their agenda and make a presentation, 10, 15-minute presentation.
so you could get us some information on the walk around, consortium.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Michelle has a question she did about that.
I think you put a couple of them. I just wondered if you had any other challenges or concerns of your program.
I don't know if we have enough time for one, in one study session. You know, I think, yeah, there are plenty of challenges. I don't know if, I don't know if we want to get into all of it right here. But I'm certainly willing to meet and talk. I'm certainly willing to meet and talk with anyone who's really interested in helping us expand or support us in any way, really.
So do you feel that the progress you're trying to attain at this point is going to move us from the top of the areas of worst down? I mean, you know, we're doing it in order to improve, so.
I think that you're doing a number of things here. One of them is the baccalaureate programs and bringing the university programs to the community so that people that are place-bound and can't travel even up to, what's the next community up?
Or said,
Yes, well, down to that are up to, yeah, Stockton and so I think that's a huge part of it. But first, getting people to the point where they can take the college courses through our programs and then taking that baccalaureate.
so I understand that. I'm just saying that within our little, but that's the junior college district.
But I think the-
Are we making progress?
Yes, I see a lot of that.
Enough progress, I would say, to sustain the money spending on the program. So that's good.
Yeah, well, let me know if, I mean, I'm available for more conversations, for sure.
Great.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you so much for coming and the presentation, and Jillian and our student, and so we appreciate hearing that.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. And just a little plug for an event that is important to our department. Our Civic Engagement Project Committee is going to be hosting a film night on Syrian refugees March 2nd, and the ABC World News film was actually shot here in Modesto with a Syrian family right here. And so we'll have the family here, we'll have those involved in their resettlement. I'm going to leave these down at the end, or give them to you. Sorry. Please come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. At this time, we'll move to the funding formula and budget update presentation with Teresa. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dan. And thank you, Board of Trustees, Chess, to go over some of our budget topics. And I will begin by saying that community colleges have a numerous number of topics that we cover. And while we just had 55 minutes today, we kind of went to the top of the barrel, if you will, the funding formula, taking a look at our district budget, talking a little bit about FTESs, and future sessions we will go into greater detail. And I know, Trustee Darren, that you had asked for some further information. We've been working on that, but we just felt that really deserves its own probably hour.
Yeah, it does.
So we left that out. So without further ado, I will begin. Just to review the state budget cycle, we'll talk about SB 361. I'll share a little bit about the district apportionment and how that is calculated. Our district full-time equivalent students, a quick history over the last 5 years of where we are and where we have come. And then our district budget. Many of you at the table have already seen the district budget, but some of you have not. So we'll start with that. Just quickly, the state budget cycle begins in our fiscal year is July 1 to June 30. The governor, as we all know, he writes the executive update, comes out with a budget in January for the entire state of California. And then, of course, a big chunk of that is education, and then we drill down into the community college budget. From January to May, Department of Finance, Legislative Analyst Office, and other bodies are working with the governor and his team to put together the final touches on the current year budget, and that culminates in what we call the May revise. The May revise just really tweaks what the governor came out with in January, but pulls in also any activity, any new revenues, maybe any new deficits statewide. From the May revise, then our numbers are refined, ours being the community college system, and then we build those in as a local district into our June budget. By law, we need to take a budget in June to our Board of Trustees. We call it the tentative budget because we haven't closed our books yet, nor has the state closed their books. And then from June through September, we're closing all of our books, and the state is finalizing their numbers, and then we bring back to the board the budget in September. So keeping in mind, we're already operating July and August before we even have a final budget in place. And sometimes that can make that a little bit tricky. Okay, so the current formula that we operate under in California community colleges is called SB 361. That's Senate Bill 361. And that passed in 06-07 and was implemented into our system. Just quickly, prior to that, we were under a formula called program-based funding, which was very complicated for some folks. It was hard for folks arguing for more money for community colleges to explain to the Department of Finance and to the legislative analysts. So a team was put together of chief business officials to work with the state chancellor's office and then submit all the information to Department of Finance to simplify what was formerly known as program-based funding, which had 5 different workload measures, down to what was passed SB 361. The work group presented the product to the then Chancellor of the Community Colleges, Jack Scott, and it was taken and it was carried in a bill. And so that is the formula we live under today. Just recently, there has been another work group formed, actually most of the members of the first work group, and we are now about the task of looking at yet another growth formula, because the current SB 361, while it was an enhancement to program-based funding, we still know that statewide there are inequities in the system. We're all serving different counties, different demographics. We just heard from the ESL folks. So what we're trying to do in this new task force is kind of soften all those inequities and get the money out to where the need is greatest. So currently, I just mentioned quickly, the program-based funding was 5 workload measures. What we did now in SB 361 is we went back to really 1 workload measure to fund our community colleges, and that is our full-time equivalent students. For those of you that are familiar with the K-12 system, the terminology in K-12 is average daily attendance. And FTEs are very close to that with some minor formula differences, but our full-time equivalent students you can think of as average daily attendance. And what I will say is 1 full-time equivalent student is 525 hours of instruction. So all the hours are accumulated, and then every 525 generates one full-time
And
equivalent
that's equal
student.
to how many units?
Pardon me?
How many units is that? That would be 15?
15 units.
15 units.
Semesters.
Mhm.
Okay. 15 units per semester.
The formula begins with looking at single college districts and then multi-college districts. And the way the basic allocation works is according to this table. Now remember, this goes back to 06, 07. So subsequent to those years, we've had COLAs, which have increased these base amounts. But initially, when this SB 361 was rolled out, these were the thresholds. If you were a single college with 20,000 or greater FTESs, your basic allocation was 5 million, and so on and so forth. Greater than 10, 4 million, and less than 10, 3 million. Now, for multi-college districts, like ours, the basic allocations change just modestly. And since we, in our district, have a larger college and a smaller college, we were the greater than 10,000, so we received a $3.5 million basic allocation, and added to that the colleges under 10,000, the 3 million. And I'll show you how that works in just a moment. Also, you heard the group just prior to me talk about sites. The formula funds centers, but what the state of California decided was we had in our system many centers that weren't generating, well, you can see it was down to as low as 250 FTEs. So while the formula grandfathered in centers with very few FTEs, the rule or the new reg came out that unless you had 1,000 FTEs, you would not be granted center status. And that did change subsequent to our issuing the bond, and that's why we've had many discussions regarding centers in Patterson or Turlock or Oakdale, in the foothills, Calaveras, because the rules changed in the middle of the game for us. But anyway, you can see how those centers would be funded based on the number of FTEs that they serve. And we do not have a center status in any of our sites. Okay. So now, if you do have a center that generates up to 500 FTEs, it will be recognized. So I stand corrected. It's recognized as a center for capital money, but we don't receive any money for full-time equivalent students until we have a center that has the 1,000. And then in December of 2014, kind of in the middle of the Great Recession, the state said, we don't have enough money to even fund any new centers. So they put all centers on hold for a period of time. Now that is just starting to open back up in our system, but in December of 2014, even if you had 1,000 FTEs and could demonstrate that, there was not the funding through the state formula. So in the funding formula, credit FTEs are funded uniformly across the state. And you may say, well, what's the big deal about that? Pre-SB 361 and subsequent to Prop 13 in 1978, all community colleges across the state had different amounts that they were funded for their credit and non-credit FTEs. What this SB 361 finally did, and there were great efforts over the years to pump money into equalize FTES, but what this did is it did equalize. There was enough money that the governor allocated in that year to equalize. So it is very important when we say that our FTEs are funded uniformly, because for years and years they were, and it caused havoc across the state, as you might imagine. Same is true for our non-credit. And then there was a new type of FTE introduced through SB 361, and it was called Enhanced. It was Career Development College Prep. It was funded between the credit and non-credit rate. Again, that caused an uproar in the state, and finally last year, that enhanced non-credit rate is now equal to the credit rate. So if a college, and we have some at Modesto Junior College, have the programs in place that meet the criteria and regulations of the CDCP, we no longer are funded less than the credit rate. We're funded at the credit rate, which was a nice change to the formula. And then in SB 361, it provides for stability, which means if a college district, and many now across the state are in this situation, if you're declining declining in enrollment, and you're going below what you earned in the prior year, what stability does, it buys you a little time. The state does not take the drop in funding away in the current year. And you'll see in just a few minutes how that's affecting our district. Once SB 361 was implemented, each year thereafter, a COLA, cost of living adjustment, was granted through the budget process. Now, many times there's a statutory COLA calculated, or I should say many times in past years, but by the time we get to the May revise of the final budget, it wasn't allocated to community colleges. Now, when it was allocated, the cost of living adjustment, that percentage, was then applied to those basic grants that I was showing you earlier, and the credit and non-credit FTES rates. So COLA enhances or brings up all of those funding amounts. In the current year, 2016-17, the credit rate, we are funded $5,004 for every credit full-time equivalent student. Remember the 525 hours. We are funded $5,004 for the CDCP, that's enhanced, and we are funded, yes, and we are, yes, thank you. And we are funded at $3,009 for the non-credit FTEs.
Those are things like providing courses, programs for adult, elderly, and some of those other things that don't lead to any kind of college.
So in the simplest of terms, this little chart, I think, kind of just spells out, we start with the base allocation. Remember in our case, 3.5 million and the 2, and then we add to it the value of the credit FTESs, so that's the number of F credit times the 5,004, add to that the CDCP, and then add to that the non-credit. That gives us what we call our basic apportionment allocation. The next slide shows you in our dollars. So if you think of that little pie chart on the prior page in the red, this is how our numbers for YCCD break out. Our base is now up to 7.8. Again, that's because COLAs have been applied to those two base numbers over the years. Our credit-based revenue, that's our credit FTEs, multiplied by the state funding mechanism or funding amount, 81,211,000. And then the non-credit, you can see, is 662,000 for our district. And then our CDCP base is at 614,000. That brings us to the 90 million. Now, we don't have a COLA in the current year budget, and our district is not growing, so we have no increases in those two areas. But also what the state budget provided in the current year was a base increase across the system. So it was really allocated based on how many FTESs you serve. And the purpose and the meaning behind that base increase is because we went as a system through many years what we called workload decline, where the state actually took money back from us. And this is the second year that the state is trying to build back community college budgets without tying it to COLA or growth, just trying to get money back into our operations. Moving on then to FTESs, actual reported and target. Column 1 are the FTESs that we actually reported in 13-14. You'll see Modesto is at 14,455, Columbia at 2,087, with a total of reported at year end of the 16,542. And then moving on to 14-15, you'll see the college reported amounts again, and you'll note that they are totaling the same number as they did in the prior year. And that was due to us using what the state has in place called a, we call it rolling or borrowing from a subsequent year. If you have courses that are scheduled that begin before June 30 and end after July 1 or after, the beginning of the next, then you can move those FTEs to 1 year or the other. In our case, we needed them so that we didn't go into that stability or that decline mechanism. So we were rolling or borrowing from for 15-16, we reported 16,542, and 16-17, the target is 16,542, but as I'll show you in a moment, we're not quite there yet, even if we borrowed every FTE that's available. So I'll talk a little bit more about that stability piece and how we'll.
Before you go on, the Modesto Junior College in column 4, should that be 14,000 instead of 16,000?
Yeah, because otherwise,
Oh, it sure should. You're right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It should be the 14. Yeah, thank you very much. Good job.
I was going to say, wow.
How does that work?
Good.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. That's a typo there. Okay.
there.
So now a little bit more on the borrowing numbers. So in 16-17, the year we are in right now, we are looking at borrowing 912. That would be every Modesto Junior College FTE available that began before June 30 and ends after July 31st, and a partial number for Columbia. They have a few left, I believe it's 5 or something FTEs. But then that would still only bring us to 16,252, which is 290 short of the prior year. That's when the stability mechanism will kick in for our district. You can see 15-16 actually earned was 15,760 and borrowed 782. Going back to 14-15, same analysis. We're looking at what was actually earned and what was borrowed to keep us just flat with the prior year. And then 13-14, borrowing 577. Here. And then 12-13 was the first year we borrowed, 596. And 11-12 was the last time we didn't use the FTEs from a separate year. So we are all about trying to build those back up again, especially now that we are in what's the stability mode, because we'll lose that money July 1 of 16, 17, 18.
Still coming up.
So
Not this year. That's what the state provides. This current year, as we're reporting our FTE, and as the whole system is reporting the FTE, as the state sees districts going into stability, they still allocate the apportionment based on the formula that I was showing you earlier, but come July 1, that money will be gone.
Of 18-19, Teresa?
17,
17.
yeah.
So,
The next
so
fiscal
July
year.
of 2018 or July of
17.
July.
When our new fiscal year begins, July 17, then our apportionment will be reduced by the value of 290 FTEs, which is 1.45 million. Now this chart shows you folks the growth rates. I was talking about the growth formula task force. For our district, now it's different across the state because it's all driven by a formula, and it's based on need, it's based on high school graduates, it's based on many, many variables. But for our district, you can see over years 14-15 through 16-17, the different rates that were calculated for our district based on our demographics, and the computational revenue associated with those growth rates, that as you saw in those charts that I was just showing you with FTEs, our district has not been earning that because we've been staying flat. So the total,
Which is true for a lot of
districts. So the total is a little over $6 million over those years. Borrowing kept us flat, so we didn't lose money. And then for 16-17, again, that 290 that will bring us into stability if nothing else changes. Now, in discussions with the colleges, there's probably more positive attendance out. We have 2 more times to report to the state, April and then July. So we may see that number. We most likely will see that number go down. But by looking at the scheduling and the sections, the number is not going to go to 0 for sure. So we'll be looking at some areas where we either reallocate funds, do some cutting, do some trimming, but currently the first period report shows us down $1.45 million. All right, enough on those FTEs. This is what all of your hard work as the board, all the college's hard work, and the Central Services Office, this is what we end up with subsequent to serving our students, both in student services, instruction, across the board. This budget was adopted in September, and then it was amended in December for some minor adjustments. We had, you could see at the top in the revenue area, we had 15,000 additional money in the baccalaureate program. And then we also put some one-time funding into our information technology expenditure budget. So basically what you're seeing, and the font is small, I apologize for that. We're trying to get all these, at least this to 2 pages, and it might be ending up too small. But you may remember at the last board meeting, we brought the quarterly report to you folks. And basically what this is showing is the adopted budget, the amended budget, and then what we're proposing for the subsequent year. And at this point in time, we really don't have enough information. We do have the January governor's proposals, but we don't have enough to really build all the revenue. We need to get those FTEs to settle down so we know how to project our revenue. But you can just see we call these the major line items of our unrestricted fund revenue. And then the next page shows you a breakdown by college and by the central services area. And then finally, the fund balance. I'd like to talk about the fund balance a little bit. The board, some years back, gave the district direction that we maintain a 10% budget. Because those of you that have been with us for some time, at the beginning of that recession that we just climbed out of a couple years ago, all community colleges took major hits. And they weren't at the beginning of the year, they were pretty much mid-year. And so our board directed staff to start moving that fund balance reserve up, and we've been able to achieve that. Now we're protected to some degree, and I'm sure you've all been reading about state budgets. Governor calls it the rainy day fund. Back in the day, I've been here so long, we had a chancellor that called ours the rainy day fund, and then we moved away from that, I guess, to more professional terminology. But the governor himself calls his the rainy day fund. And basically what he is looking at is we're, like it or not, we're heading back to another recession. So we want to be prepared so we don't have these huge swings and disrupt our programs and our colleges.
Could you say, I've heard some districts talk about having like a 17% reserve, and my understanding in talking to you is sometimes we're comparing apples to oranges.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. Thank you, James. Thank you, James. Yeah, they're all James. Now we do struggle with this all of the time. Let's go. So there are studies happening all the time. What's your fund balance? There'll be searches across the state. What's your fund balance? What's the percent of unrestricted revenues? And you'll hear 17%, you'll hear 27%, you'll hear 4%, you'll hear 5%. Basically, what we're trying to work with the state is let's define fund balance, because you can see in this chart, our fund balance is at, the third column, the amended budget is at $12,483,000. Well, that's higher than 10%. But fund balance is made up of a lot more than just the board designated reserve. So when we hear that, or we hear folks say they have even lower, and they'll say, well, why do you need to maintain a 10? Or why do you have a 25% reserve? That's, you know, really not good business. It's not that it's in the board directed reserve. I don't know 100%, but I would doubt seriously any board has directed over a 15% perhaps. Now, boards are starting to become more conservative for the very reasons I just shared, with the recession that could happen again and the volatility of FTEs. But to hear those numbers, and I appreciate that question, because we get that a lot. We had some folks, maybe 5-6 years ago, say, why do you have a 34% reserve? 34% reserve. Basically, the analysis that was made in-house here, not in the fiscal area, but all the funds were looked at, capital project funds, financial aid, bookstore, cafeteria, and someone took all those fund balances and totaled them. Well, anything outside of the unrestricted general fund is restricted for specific purposes. It's not available for operations. So you could see numbers up as high as that, but that's when you're looking at every fund of your district and all the reserves of your district. If you thought about our Measure E, our bond fund, well, I mean, that would jump our number up significantly if we were looking at the monies that are just still sitting in there. But anyway, that I appreciate that clarification, because it's a complicated topic for many, many folks, but it's one that we really need to keep talking about, because certainly if we had that reserve, we wouldn't be in any cutting mode.
So there's some you skipped over, we have to go back to, or?
Oh, this is the fund balance, I believe, and then
Okay.
yeah. And then the note simply defines the two adjustments we made back in December. Okay, so now moving on to just a quick pie chart look at our expenditures. And I'll start with page 23 in your booklet. This is the overall general fund budget. And this is how, in our accounting and our fund accounting terminology, we call them major object codes. And so we're breaking this pie out by our major object codes: salaries, academic, salaries classified, salaries management, fringe benefits, we have supplies, other operating, capital outlay, and other outgo. What's significant here over the years, since we have had very little new revenue coming into our district, is we always look at the salaries and benefits to the total. Overall for the district, it's 86% salary and benefits to the overall district general fund. Now remember that brings in all the central operations. So you would assume, and you will see, that the central office is a lower percentage because we have more of the energy costs and those things that are outside of the salaries and benefits. Moving on to Modesto Junior College, same pie chart, pulling the budget. The salary and benefits are 96% of their $56 million. And Columbia College is at 92%. And then central office.
I think it's important, in a single college district, the percentage would be down for the colleges, because they would have all those expenses that now are in the central office, central services.
Right. We cut it too short. I could have got a couple more hours on that one. Okay, so anyway, future topics. Again, we really do want to have a study session on the STRS and PERS, huge topic in California, government and schools. So actually, Sarah, our controller, is working on a very in-depth presentation at some point when you call that. We want to talk about the district allocation model. I know that was a topic that folks wanted. Again, that one takes probably about at least a half hour, 45 minutes to walk through that. Computing FTEs is a pretty simple formula, but we'd like to share that with you. And I would offer the same as the folks prior to me. If any of you have questions and you just want to go over certain topics, as long as we don't have a quorum and violate the Brown Act, I am more than willing and available, as Sarah and Trevor up at Columbia as well. We want to talk about the 1725 full-time, part-time. That is a very important topic in community colleges. It's how we teach our courses. Do we use adjunct? Do we use full-time? And how that works. And now I missed that. And then I think the final thing, which it really isn't final, I don't want to lead you to believe that's all we would have to talk about, is the FON, the faculty obligation of the full-time obligation. But there's many, many other topics, as I stated when I began, that we certainly can address for our board. So any questions, any particular pages you'd like to look at?
I have a quick question about the percent of salary and benefits for Columbia versus MJC. Ideally, should they be the same, or why are they different?
It's staffing pattern. As we allocate, I say from the district level, we allocate a target, and then the colleges allocate based on their budget allocation. So really the presidents would need to speak to the staffing.
Okay.
So Teresa, from an efficiency and budgeting standpoint, since we're a multi-college district, each college has to be looked at separately, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And very good point, because when you're operating a small college, it's more expensive than a large college.
Right.
And in the SB 361, the state did recognize small rural colleges,
Right.
but they didn't recognize a small college in a multi-college district,
Right.
which we've been fighting for years. But yes, but the
Because you have economy of scale.
economy of scales
Yeah.
are very different.
Yeah.
And in our allocation model, when we do that study session, you'll see how we are attempting to flatten that inequity, but it's hard. And Angie can speak to that. It's very hard to operate a small college, especially in today's world, and all the services we need to provide, and which are great. We need them for our students, but it's expensive.
So, looking at each college separately, with Modesto Junior College, its salary and benefits at 96%. Given your background, would you say that is high?
Yes.
Okay. And even at 92% for Columbia?
90 would probably,
Would be
around there,
target.
but 92 isn't hugely out of line for a
Right.
very small college of, 1,800
Right.
FTEs or 19. But the 96 should be looked at.
So if we had one-time reimbursements in the future, not that we think we're going to get any of those, but we can always hope, or a COLA, where would you like to see those unrestricted funds? What would your recommendation be? Since you've already pointed out that you have to look at your liabilities separately,
Mm-hmm.
and so we know that we have some of these long-term liabilities, is that kind of where you would like to see money earmarked?
One-time funds that have come in, true one-time, because cost of living adjustments and growth are not,
Right.
those are ongoing. True one-time funds, I believe it would be the most prudent to put some of that towards those STRS and PERS increases, because that protects all of us.
Right.
The colleges, the central office, all staff, because as those costs go up, they just encroach more and more on the general fund. There's no other source coming in for those. So one-time funds, now with cost of living adjustments, of course, those are bargains. And, we don't really.
But I'm talking about the COLA from the state.
That's ongoing.
Ongoing, right?
Ongoing.
Yeah.
And so those would be bargains, cost of living adjustments.
Right.
Whether they end up in collective bargaining agreements or not, or they go, whatever happens, but those are ongoing. One-time funds, we have worked very hard. We've worked with the board, the chancellor, the colleges we have $6 million now in the STRS and PERS trust, but it's far short of what we'll need by the year 2040. But that's where I would like to see as a
I
business
guess
officer.
the COLA I was looking at from the funding formula.
Yeah, well, one of the things, I remember when I came to California,
Not the
and they had
salary
a COLA, I said, well, it was kind of the expectation that that would go towards salaries and benefits. But the fact of the matter is that that's the increase in everything. It's, the utilities that go up, it's
Right.
all of those expenses, and so we have to figure that.
Yeah, and as an example on the COLA issue, when we implement step and column increases at July 1 of each fiscal year, for our district, it's over $750,000. So think about if there's not new money coming in, and maybe a modest COLA. The COLA hasn't even been enough to cover the step and column. So really, we're shuffling internally already. We're trying to reallocate.
So you're doing journal transfers and all that to shuffle money around?
Out of major object codes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm. Wow.
But we do maintain the 10% reserve at the direction of the board. I think we'll have a policy coming to the board to get that solidified. It's been a directive, but we need to get it solidified. And then we have the various other components of the fund balance. But we're running a very, very tight ship right now. And and as Jane said, statewide this year, many districts are in our position. Not all, there are some that are growing. But as you saw from the history, we've been in this for 5 years. So a little bit different than some of our other colleagues.
Right. And for one of the future items, if you could, because I know you guys have it, because we're required to do, if you could include in that STRS and PERS, our most recent GASB filing for our retiree healthcare liability.
Yeah. Okay, also what we prepared is a multi-page acronym.
Yay.
No, I'm not saying.
I'm excited about
But I just thought it might, and some of these change over the years, we try to add when. You try to add when.
There will be a test.
Yeah, AE is on.
That's just for this.
Yeah, but
Government.
some questions, and I'll just take a moment. There were some questions, and rightly so, from our new board members, some of them on the acronyms we use on the purchase order list. And you're right, what we're trying to do because of the number of characters, we'll spell out as much as we can, but there's simply sometimes we cannot spell out all these lengthy acronyms.
Right.
But I will always be available to, help you out with what they are. And hopefully this might be a little tool that could help you with, what is AE, BG? I had to ask.
Made my day.
So anyway, hopefully this will be a helpful tool. Hopefully this gives you a very high level look at our district budget and our FTEs, but really that's the nuts and bolts of what we're doing. That's where our revenue comes, is serving our students.
Well, this was my favorite presentation. So.
Yeah, we know you.
Well, all right. Any other questions from anyone? Anything you'd like to see? Okay. And just go ahead and give us a call if there's other topics, or Jane, and we can get those.
Thank you.
Teresa, thank you so much. You're always very nice. Am I correct that Columbia is no longer with us? No, they're there.
They're there.
See the little top right?
Very small.
Are there people, I see the room.
I don't see anybody.
But that's what I meant.
That's still there.
Okay.
We put the advertising.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a break. Let's come back ready to start at 6. So back in your seats at 2 minutes to 6.
What was that you said?
The beginning of the board meeting will be.
Okay. There's a lot of them. There's probably a good couple hundred.
Under discussion, go to conflict of interest training with Eileen. Welcome.
Thank you. It's the first time I've been in the building since the dedication. Beautiful. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Eileen O'Hare Anderson. I'm a partner at Ebert Cassidy. I've been practicing for coming up on 25 years, and every time I say that, I can't believe it. I also conclude that I must have graduated from law school at the age of 10. Yeah, the only possible conclusion. Most of that time I've been practicing with community college districts, and community college districts are 98% or so of my practice. This is what I do. And I think I have the best job in the world. I love my clients. They're great clients to have. And I don't know a lot of lawyers who can say that, really. So, conflicts of,
Graciela, don't worry. It's not where you pointed, it's the wrong, maybe the button.
I didn't hit the blackout button, really, I didn't.
Technology. I know. It never fails. Let's see if a simple reset works. I don't understand why Dan Duffy's jumping up to help. This is too low-level technology.
Because I pushed the mouse button instead.
Oh.
So I need a mouse. I can do a mouse.
It's just a backup line.
You know what? I can remember presenting before we had PowerPoint, so. Okay. Now I'm really goofing this up, aren't I? There we go. All right. I got the hang of it. So first we're going to talk about conflict of interest questions, and then I've been asked to talk for a few extra minutes about closed session issues, a little bit of Brown Act and closed session. So two of the sexier topics that we have in our arsenal, but we'll see if we can't avoid putting everyone to sleep. So in general, when we analyze conflict of interest questions, we look at three areas of law. The first is Government Code Section 1090. The second is the Political Reform Act found at Government Code Section 87-100. And the third is the common law. And we're going to go through each of those in turn. All of them essentially say that a public officer has a duty to avoid conflicts and must be disinterested in the decisions in front of them. They have to be impartial, free from bias, particularly bias from financial interests, but other issues as well. So first we look at Government Code Section 1090, which says a public officer or employee, so it's broader than just trustees, it applies to employees as well, may not make contracts in which he or she is financially interested. So over the years, we've developed the courts and the Attorney General has developed this rubric for testing a 1090 conflict. Is the person a public officer or a public employee? First question. Second, is there a contract? Third, did the person make the contract, and do they have a financial interest? Sounds so very simple, doesn't it? But it's not. As with many things, the devil is in the details. What is a financial interest? Well, conveniently, they didn't bother to define that. There's nothing in the code that tells us what a financial interest is. Generally, it is some interest that would provide a financial gain to the officer or the employee. You can also look at it, is it something that would divide the officer's loyalties? Are they going to be torn at heart over this question? There's a great deal of litigation about what is a financial interest. This is as good a point as any to tell you two caveats about our conflict of interest advice. The first is we are very conservative with the advice that we give, and that's for one very simple reason. People go to prison over these kind of violations. Anybody remember Bill Honig? Bill Honig served prison time over a conflict of interest question.
What was it?
It was complicated. He entered into a contract that was with someone, an entity who was renting space from his wife, renting office space from his wife. And so since there is a community property interest there, it was found to be his interest. I may have gotten some of the details a little off, but that's
Okay.
pretty close. So that's the first reason. We are very conservative with our advice. We don't want you all ending up on the front page over a conflict question. The same is true of Brown Act. We're very conservative with our Brown Act advice for the same reason. I don't want my clients ending up on the front page over a Brown Act question. The second thing that I need to tell you about our conflict of interest advice, and it's this: we only give conflict advice based on a written opinion letter. We don't do it on the fly. We don't do it without looking at all the facts, doing heavy duty legal research, and reducing our opinion to writing. It's surprising the number of times when you start writing an opinion letter, you find some oddball fact that nobody had thought to tell us, or there's some new case or a twist on a case that wasn't readily apparent. So we only do these, because they are so serious, we only give these opinions by way of a written conflict of interest opinion. Okay. More Government Code Section 1090. There are exceptions. Once Government Code Section 1090 is triggered, there are exceptions. The first is for a non-interest, the second is for a remote interest, and the third is this narrow rule of necessity exception. A non-interest is, there are 16 or 17 separate subdivisions in the code that say it's not a conflict if this, or this is a better way to say it, this is a non-interest. They're very complicated. There are a lot of them. We're not going to analyze them all in this presentation. We'd be here until Sunday. But that's the first thing you need to know. There is such a thing as a non-interest. The second thing you need to know is there are remote interests. Again, that I think maybe 14 different remote interests that will not buy. Yeah, this is why we only do written opinions. Very rare that these come into play, but they do exist. The rule of necessity comes into play when there is the governing body has to act. It has to act to accomplish its purpose. And in order to come to agreement, you need the officer who has a conflict to vote. So either there's not enough board members and it can't wait, or there are a few.
I can give you an example. My husband's on the Board of Supervisors. There's 5 members and 4 of them are farmers. And whenever they have to vote on farming change or impact, then they have to draw straws, and only 3 are allowed to vote. 1 who is not a farmer, and then the other 4, 2 vote, 2 can't. So it has to be unanimous.
Excellent example. There are also a few things in the community colleges that require a unanimous vote. So that would be another example for a rule of necessity. That's a really good one. All right.
Good job.
A Government Code Section 1090 conflict bars the entire board from acting. So if one board member has a direct financial interest in a contract you want to enter into, it disqualifies the entire board, not just that one person abstaining, leaving the dais, stating their conflict and leaving the dais. The whole board is barred from acting. They're very draconian laws that we're talking about here. Abstaining is not sufficient. It doesn't matter if the deal is more advantageous to the entity than you could get somewhere else. It doesn't matter. You cannot enter into the contract. It doesn't matter that you thought you were doing the right thing. It doesn't matter that you got advice of counsel and your lawyer told you it was okay. It doesn't matter. The obligation is on you as board members and as employees. No one else can take this on for you. there is a case that involved member of the San Diego Port Authority, I think it was, who thought there might be a conflict, got advice from the port's attorney. The port's attorney said, yeah, sure, no problem, go ahead, no conflict. They entered into the agreement and there was a complaint and it was determined that there was a conflict of interest. And the board member later on sued the lawyer and the court said no. It's your response, and it's only your responsibility.
So if we wanted to buy, if our board wanted to buy a piece of property, and 6 of us had no idea what, was going on with, and I had some kind of interest in this, we couldn't buy that piece of property?
Correct. So, true story. Was it the county? Can't remember if it was one of the cities or I think it was the county of Fresno wanted to buy some property. And one of the board of supervisors owned it. And I can't remember what they needed it for. I think they wanted it for a park. Anyway, they couldn't vote to buy this property. They ended up having to condemn it by way of eminent domain. Thank you. And the board member couldn't participate in any of the discussions around, anyway, it got very complicated, but yes, you're
Once it was,
once they got it.
Right, then they could act on it.
So there's another case that was a 1090 case where the, was a city, and I think it was a city in the Central Valley, and the board member wanted to sell property to the entity at a below market price. And the conflict arose because selling this property at the below market price meant that the city would go in here, which would increase the value of other properties surrounding. And this board member also had some properties, in addition to the property they were selling, they owned other property which would necessarily increase in value or likely increase in value. And the courts invalidated the sale, even though it was more advantageous to the city than buying the lot next door, which would have been more expensive. Not only did they invalidate the sale, the city got to keep the property, and this is the part I just can't wrap my head around, and the board member had to give back the money. The board member ended up out the property and out the money. The city ended up with the money and the property.
What's the rationale behind that?
Logic, you're looking for logic.
Yeah, oh, there I go.
Yeah, there you go.
What side you're on?
I know, that case drives me nuts. I have a hard time selling that to board members as a reasonable conclusion.
Because it's not.
Because it's not, exactly. If the contract is already made, if we've already entered into the contract, that's why they had to give back the money, because the contract was void. The contract is like it never happened. So can't keep the money because there's no contract. And they'd made they'd already started working on the property, and I don't remember the level to which they had improved it, but they'd already put money into the property, so they couldn't force the city to return the property. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. But the moral of the story is, this is a serious, draconian, horrible results come from 1090 conflicts. Yeah. All right. Political Reform Act is Government Code Section 87-100. Similar to Government Code Section 1090. 1090 is the most restrictive, then Political Reform Act is a little bit less restrictive. It says that a public official may not enter into any kind of a government decision in which he or she has a financial interest. Okay, Government Code Section 1090, can't enter into a contract where you have a financial interest. Political Reform Act, you can't enter into you can't make any kind of governmental decision where you have a financial interest. So a little bit broader. The Political Reform Act conflicts do not disqualify the whole board.
You can abstain.
A board member can, typically what a board member with a Political Reform Act conflict will do is they will stand up, as the presiding officer calls the item, they'll stand up, they'll say, I have a conflict because I own whatever, or because whatever it is. And then they will stand down from the dais, and actually they should leave the room. Although there's also some authority that says they can address the board as any member of the public would address the board.
Yeah, I read that.
So a little bit of a conflict there, but that's how this goes. So not quite as draconian as the other. So as with Government Code Section 1090, over the years we've developed, a rubric to analyze these questions. The first is, are you a public official participating in some kind of a government decision? Do you exercise some kind of discretion in this decision? If yes, do you have an economic interest? Again, there's not a lot of definition of economic interest, but we can import what we know from Government Code Section 1090. If you have an economic interest, is it directly or indirectly related to or involved in the decision? Is it material, meaning more than a little bit? If there's an interest and if it's material, is it foreseeable your decision's going to have an effect? If so, is it foreseeable from the effect on everybody in the members of the public? So, in the context of a city, if a city were deciding whether to raise the sales tax, that could have a material effect on a city council member. They may spend money in the city. We would hope they do spend money in the city. It could raise the amount of sales tax they would have to pay. But it's not any different than the effect it would have on everybody in the city. So it's the same effect as the public generally. If it's direct, if it is distinguishable, is your participation nonetheless required? So there's also a rule of necessity here where board members can participate if their vote is necessary. Okay, so to keep this a little bit interesting, we put case studies in here because they are helpful, and it gives you a chance to talk and not just hear me. Board is asked to review a proposal to lease land to a local business who pays Trustee Jones a monthly salary. The decision to be made by the district will not affect Jones's monthly salary. So Jones is going to make the same whether the company gets this land or doesn't get this land. Can Trustee Jones participate in the decision?
Is this a trick question?
No, I'm giving you an easy one at first.
No,
The obvious answer would be no after what we just talked about, but that's what I'm thinking.
Now, you're looking at your handouts. I asked them not to put the answers on the handout. Did they not put the...
no.
They're not there.
No.
It's not there.
Hey, these guys know.
Otherwise, I think it occurred to me during one presentation when I thought everybody was a lot smarter than I thought they should be. They have the answers.
No, I want to see how far this goes. Let's say you're a city councilman. You own a chain of hot dog stands. That's what you do. And one of the hot dog stands is on a corner, and then the city has to make a decision about improving the sidewalk on that corner. What do you do then? No.
That's a conflict. Now, I would have to say, and again, remember, we don't do this on the fly. I'm pretty comfortable that's a conflict. I would need to sit down and think, need some more facts, whether that's a 1090 or a political.
But couldn't an attorney argue that it wouldn't necessarily affect
He's not the only one.
Won't it make it easier for people to beat their path to his hot dog stand if the sidewalks improved?
But I was there first.
Before the sidewalk?
Can't fix the hot dog stand of the sidewalk?
But if they don't improve it and somebody trips and falls,
Yeah.
the city, because they didn't do the proper structure
It's a different-
repairs that they should have done.
Then you might be getting into rule of necessity. We'd need to analyze also if this is a remote interest or a non-interest, because it might not have, I need more facts, because it might not affect you any differently, Mr. Hot Dog Owner, than the rest of. These are really, really fact specific. And some little itty bitty fact that you don't think is gonna make a difference just turns everything. I'll give you an example. I had a conflict of interest opinion, a couple years ago now, where I was asked, does board member A have a conflict because his adult son works for the entity? I would have bet money the answer to that was no. Till I found out that the board member lent the son $100,000 to make a payment on a loan. Down payment on a house, whatever it was, a boat. So now there's a financial relationship there. See, and who would have thought? How many people get loans from their parents to buy whatever, start out in life? Very common. Who would have thought that would?
So all it takes is, what I'm hearing is a person to really want to screw with the public official and really dig deep.
That's not the lesson I hope I'm sending. I hope the lesson I'm sending is dig deep yourself and keep yourself out.
Like, how is someone to know to go to court, to take you to court over that kind of an issue?
Right, and in my example of the father and the son and the loan.
Yeah, like who figured that out?
No, the father told me that in the course of me giving the conflict of interest opinion. The chances of somebody in the public figuring that out, pretty slim.
But again,
But
you want
do you want to end up in? You don't want to end up in this kind of trouble. Yes.
But going back to his hot dog thing, because I must be hungry. So suppose that, this is one thing, wouldn't it be a conflict if they fixed his corner, but then people notice that there are a bunch of other corners nearby where there aren't hot dog
stands.
and they're not fixed? And so it looks sort of like favoritism, like they're fixing your
Especially if he was part of
and not others, they're equal.
Right. If you're on the council, yeah, or you're the planning director, yeah, it starts to look like something's going on.
But if you're doing sort of a global fixing and his just happens to get fixed.
Right, see, that was more my question.
Okay.
Like, you have a bunch of items that you're gonna fix, and one of them just happens to be.
Yeah.
Right. I'd need a lot more facts, and I'd need to sit down in a quiet, darkened room for a little
Because
while.
let's say it was just one consent item, where everything was included, and the hot dog stand was just on one corner of like 30 corners that were gonna be improved.
We're gonna have to watch this guy.
If there's another reason, another lesson I hope you walk out of here with is, got to watch out for that stuff. You really have to be vigilant about what's on your agenda. And consent, I love consent because it makes the meeting go a lot quicker, but
See, that's fine.
covers yeah, there's a lot of stuff on the consent.
The bottom line is, if you see something on the agenda, and I've gone through a lot of trainings like this, you see something on the agenda, whether it's on consent or an action item, and something pops out at you, and you have the votes to make it pass, you better just to take the safe course and just say, stand up, I'm recusing myself, state the conflict, walk out, and let it go.
Let it go.
And because if it's later down the road, somebody says, by the way, this happened. It's like when I was on the retirement board and my own retirement came up, they're always on the consent. I stated the conflict. My wife's retirement will be coming up in May, and I will do the same thing. And that one's pretty easy. I have a financial interest in that, not only for myself, but for her. But if anything stands out, it's better just to take a very conservative approach
And if it involves a contract, you really want to have somebody look at that because that's a 1090, right? Remember Government Code Section 1090 is the one where they're going to come and take away your birthday?
But define what you mean by contract.
A contract, any kind of agreement. So
we hire someone.
Correct.
Okay.
You hire,
Or we buy land.
or you buy, or
An MOU agreement.
could be, who's going to build your next building? Who's your next architect?
Yeah, that was never on the consent agenda, was it?
No.
No, these can be on the action
Right.
agenda too.
The trouble with, trouble is the wrong word, the issue, the concern that you need to be aware of with the consent is, it's really easy to say, oh yeah, the consent's fine.
I haven't seen it.
No, and you have, this is a good board and a very diligent board, but have I got other clients where it's, oh yeah, the consent's fine? Yeah, it happens.
So if the hot dog owner says.
Oh, it's fine. I'm gonna make a case study hot dog.
All the hot dog owner has to
Put a can of hot dogs.
Depends on whether it's a contract that we're.
You're all,
Then the whole board.
Either all.
Right. If it's a contract, you're all out. What the hypothetical John gave me is probably a political reform act. It's probably a government decision rather than entering into a contract to buy hot dogs or to cater the next board meeting with hot dogs.
so there you go.
I see hot dogs stand. Hot dogs have hot dogs at the next board.
So now that we got you here, like, one of the boards I serve on besides this one is I serve on the City of Modesto's Board of Building Appeals.
Well,
So let's say we had an item before.
No, they're not paying this lawyer.
No, but she would know though, that's why I'm asking.
We gave city examples.
Related to a
actually, we do work for the city of Modesto, so I need to be careful.
So let's say there was a appeals issue that came before our board, and let's say like I used to live at that house,
Okay.
because that's happened before and I've recused myself, just in case.
You used to live there?
Yeah,
Do you have any interest in the house?
but just my dad used to own it, so.
But you don't own anything now? I'm not seeing a financial interest there, although we'll talk in a minute about common law conflicts, maybe there, but we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, Political Reform Act, back on track. Doing fine on time. So here's what do you have to do? You have to identify in some detail what your financial interest is. If it's in the closed session, you make a general disclosure during the open session before you go into closed. Leave the room, refrain from participating. You don't kibitz into the decision. You can make statements as any other member of the public, limited to what's yours, 3 minutes or 5 minutes? 5 minutes, limited to 5 minutes. Preferable to leave the room, to step outside the boardroom and let the rest of the board not have to stare you in the face as they make their decision. Again, can make a statement during public comment time. You can't count them in the quorum. You can't count you in the quorum. No, they're for employees, and these do apply to employees. There's no clear requirement how the Political Reform Act applies. So it gets kind of interesting here, but when in doubt, go tell the chancellor. Okay, common law is the third level. So we talked about Government Code Section 1090, Government Code Section 87-100, Political Reform Act, and the least restrictive, easiest to address is the common law. So I have to give you like 30 seconds of jurisprudence about what is common law. So there are two kinds of law in the United States, leaving Louisiana out of it. There are, no, seriously, they're a different kind. They're a Napoleonic code. They don't do law the same way we do. So ignoring Louisiana, the other 49 states and the federal government, there are two kinds of law. Statute, education code, government code, harbors and navigation code, revenue and tax, all the codes. There are 28 of them, I think. all the codes. That's one kind of law. The second kind of law is judge-decided law, and that's called the common law. And that is interpreting the statutes, applying this rich history we have of common law that has come down, I mean, back to England, back to pre-revolutionary days, back to very nearly to the Magna Carta.
Wow.
So that's common law, judge decided. It's evolving. It's very organic. It happens every single day in the courts of appeal.
Is that like precedent?
Yes,
Oh,
that is precedent.
okay.
That is exactly what it is. So that's common law, judge decided, case made law. So the shorthand lawyers use for it is common law. So the common law conflict rules have truly been around for a lot longer than even the statutory, the government code provisions about conflicts. They predate all of that. They are very similar in some cases, but the common law goes a little bit farther. It applies to where there is or could be a perception that there's a conflict of interest. So like Caesar's wife, you must be above reproach, and there can't even be a perception that you have a conflict of interest. So it's not anything that you have a financial interest in. Those we deal with under the 1090 and Political Reform Act. These are other things. So if I am on a building board, yeah, you come up with some good examples. If I'm on a building board of appeals, and the next appeal up is from the woman who took away my high school sweetheart, and I still harbor animus based on that, should I recuse myself from making that decision? Yeah.
Kidding?
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, I'm making an exaggerated example with the high school sweetheart, but if I come to this decision with any kind of a prejudgment, whether it's based on the fact that, you know, we're neighbors and we don't get along or whatever, I have to be able to be completely impartial when I make this decision.
So like, what if you're on the city council and like the previous council meeting, there was a lady complaining about a tree in her yard and she wanted to cut, and she calls you a punk and, you know, you're no good, and then you have to make a decision about removing her tree the next week. What do you do?
Remove the tree.
Rise above.
You have to answer that. So there are two kinds of issues that come up under the common law. The first is actual conflict. The second is perceived conflict. If there is a perception that you will...
But someone could always make the argument that it is a perception, right? This is...
Not always, but if there is a perception that you have taken such a strong position in the previous council meeting that the tree can't go because it's, you know, we're called Oakdale and that's the oak, you know, if you have taken such a strong position that you are seen as not being impartial, I'd recuse yourself.
Yeah, I have some of it when we have medical retirement. And even though I had no financial interest in that, if I supervised any of these people or they were my friend, I would recuse myself.
If your friend comes in front of you for something, you are, I'm sorry,
You're
gone.
Yeah, you're gone.
Recused.
Yeah.
Not a question.
But with John's question, the lady would have to prove, wouldn't she, that he had some perceived...
Yeah, it would have to be, I mean, I would think more than just, you know, as public officials, you kind of sort of get a certain amount of thick skin about being called a punk.
Well, people get called worse things in city council. I'm just telling you.
Right. We don't want a vocabulary exercise. Yeah, you have to take a certain amount of that, and you know, we understand that, and you know, is that really going to prejudice you against this woman making a fair decision about this woman's tree? No, probably not. But if there is a perception, and it was so what she said was so outrageous that anybody would think you have a perception. I'm using a lot of touchy-feely, imprecise, non-lawyer-like words. Have you noticed that?
Mhm.
Yeah,
That's common.
that's common law.
I have a question. I have actually two questions. So it's got, I'm assuming it's got to fall under one of the exceptions you're talking about. How does this work with things like when the board decides on the level of medical benefits when they get medical benefits? The same medical, and it's part of policies and government code too. And we've even had some trustees who were former faculty members who get retirement. And so if the board says, yes, we want to add more funds to the retirement, how does that work?
So, again, answering the question without answering the question, we would look to see whether that falls, and I can't remember whether that's a non-interest or a remote interest, but we would look at those and analyze those. Right, one of the exceptions.
So like when Gina does the negotiating and we go for a 4% raise, if she gets that 4% raise, that's no conflict?
It's not, because she's negotiating with,
On behalf of.
right, with the widget union, right? So she's deciding what the widget union is gonna make.
That's not a good term.
Not widgets, okay.
What do you have against widgets?
Theoretical endeavors, the theoretical endeavors staff, she's negotiating with them. Then the board makes a decision about what level of compensation administration is going to get. And I know that typically you compensate, you increase equally.
For the board.
Yeah.
Right, but there is a perceived conflict of interest.
Yeah, but it's not set in stone what the board is going to do. The board then makes a separate decision, which Gina is not involved in, about what the administration is going to get, what increases the administration is going to get.
Administrators who also benefit from, how does that, I don't.
Because they don't really benefit, right?
They got a pay raise too.
We have Me Too clauses.
They have Me Too clauses.
But
I have a question.
the board makes a separate decision whether they're going to give the, I can't remember what you call them, MSC.
Well, LTAC.
LTAC, thank you. Now I have to remember who calls it MSC, and that'll drive me crazy all the way home. The board makes a separate decision about what LTAC is going to get. Typically, is it a Me Too? Yes, but that is not a given. That's an independent decision that the board makes when it sits down with LTAC.
Not in policy.
Right.
In practice.
It's in what? Practice?
Which doesn't mean it's.
And in retirement, if the board acts to add money to the retirement fund or whatever, and there are board members who are retired from the district, would they have to recuse themselves for being on those decisions?
Again, answering the question without answering the question, because I haven't done an opinion, and if I had, I wouldn't be talking about it in open session. We would look at whether that's a remote interest or a non-interest. Analyze those, because there is a broader application. It's a broader application to an entire group rather than one individual. Common law? Common law. Since it worked out so well last time, we'll go forward. Board of Trustees member Huang has a son who is an adjunct faculty member for the district. The board is considering disciplining Huang's son for absenteeism. Can the trustee participate in the decision?
That's another easy one.
Probably not.
What's the answer?
I didn't want to make these too tricky. All right, same facts. Trustee Trustee Wong serves on a board committee that makes recommendations to the board regarding district-wide policies. The committee is considering a policy that the part-time faculty union has stated it opposes. The part-time faculty union has come out against a policy. Can Trustee Huang participate? I beg your pardon, that's me.
No.
I'd love to hear people bring something.
No.
Sorry. I thought I had turned that off. Can Trustee Huang participate on the committee?
Yeah.
I think there's a
No.
common law conflict. I think there is going to be a perception that Trustee Huang's loyalties to both to the district and to his son are going to be divided. So I think there's a common law conflict here. All right.
But what if he went on the district side and against the union?
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what the decision is, because you don't get to the decision until you've decided whether he participates.
Okay.
Right? We don't get that
The
far.
worst about him, though, that's what I don't, assuming that you can't trust him, he's not ethical, he's not worthy.
No, it's not assuming that.
Yes, it is.
No, it's assuming that he is perceived to have divided loyalties to both his son, who's a member of the union, and to the district. So we don't get as far as, well, what if he decided this way or that way, because he can't participate.
Like Mike Riley's son.
All right. Ms. Guzman recently became a member of the Board of Trustees. Trustee Guzman is married to Frank, a full-time faculty member with the district. Could Frank's employment with the district create any conflicts of interest for Trustee Guzman?
Yeah.
Leslie answered it.
Answer that one. That's a tricky one.
I mean, depending on what happened, so I told you, these are very fact-specific. Things we don't know, how long have they been married? That may not be important. How long has I don't know that it's Mr. Guzman, but Ms. Guzman's husband been employed?
Why would that be?
Because if the employment there's one of the non-interests or remote interests, I always have to pull them apart, but one of the exceptions applies if the employee has been with the entity for a year before the
Okay.
trustee.
Or so if you're looking like at longevity or anything like that.
Right.
I have a question, on that same one. The previous one was a son, this one was a spouse. What if it's, and previously you had the example of a scorned
Right.
love partner.
High school sweetheart, but okay.
What if it's a friend?
Who was a hot
Where's
dog
the dividing line? What if Ms. Goodman, it's her friend?
Who was a hot
And
dog
then who, it does have to be how do you even prove that? It goes back to the high school sweetheart. Where do you draw those lines?
So if this were a friend, this could cause conflicts of interest. Probably not, although I'd need to know, is there some kind of financial relationship between
Is it
them?
always related to finances?
Not,
Oh, not always.
1090 and Political Reform Act is financial.
Okay.
Common law, if this is your friend, if Frank is Ms. Guzman's best friend,
Yeah.
there could be a common law conflict. Oh, there we go.
So it helps to not have any friends.
Yeah.
Don't have friends?
Now we get it.
Don't worry, you're a trustee, you won't make many forms.
You won't make any more friends.
So here we go, same facts. Frank has been a faculty member for 10 years. In addition to his full-time assignment, he also teaches overload and receives overload pay. Is there an impermissible conflict of interest?
Who is Frank?
Frank is.
Frank is the husband. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wait, what is the conflict?
Anne has asked the exact
Yeah.
question. Is it a Government Code Section 1090 conflict?
It
No.
doesn't-
Common law.
It doesn't say what the conflict is.
Right. Is it a political reform act? Probably not. It's common law.
If there's like, they're voting on.
Yeah, what decision are they making?
Increasing the, overtime or adjunct.
Right. So the exception that allows employment, the trustee's spouse to be employed for more than a year assumes status quo, that we don't change anything about, in this case, about Frank's employment. So we don't promote Frank, we don't increase his overload, we don't, we certainly couldn't discipline him, we keep his status quo. So if
Again, it's common law, so the stating the conflict and recusing yourself is.
Right.
The trustee, as long as the trustee recuse themselves, pertaining to, Frank's union and the scenario you laid out, it would not prevent the trustee from voting on the other contracts, correct?
Probably, yes. I mean, you could throw some additional fact at me that would make me change that opinion, but that's probably correct. So let's change the facts.
Gina, or the people negotiating it, wouldn't be an issue here either then.
Say that again.
No.
Comparing
The Me2 clause, I thought that's what you were saying.
No, me too is when, you know, one union negotiates something and then
The other
That wouldn't
get it.
be an issue.
practice is.
Two different organizations.
Not policy, if we had a policy that
Two
says
different
everybody's the same,
organizations.
then it's a
Right.
conflict. If we
Yeah,
had a policy that.
Right.
that's 2 years.
But let's change these facts a little bit and say,
Go back to the second. Okay, so what are we gonna change it?
let's say, and as a matter of fact, this might be, you know what? It's the very next typo, so let's just go forward. Same facts, the district is considering increasing overload assignments, so we're gonna say every faculty member can now take another 3 units overload, including Frank. Trustee Guzman is aware of the conflict, she publicly identifies in detail, recuses herself, leaves the room, closes the door behind her, sprinkles holy water, and says a prayer while she's out in the hallway. So done everything we can think of. Conflict cured?
I would say no.
I knew it would be no. She wouldn't have asked. if
Yes,
she
she
was
was
asking.
asking, yes.
Go back, can I see it again?
Because we're increasing Frank's pay.
Okay, but it's,
And Trustee Guzman has a community property interest in Frank's pay, right? So that's where the financial comes. It is arguably it could be argued that it's a contract. I've always taken the position it wouldn't be, but even if it's not a conflict, it's a political reform act conflict.
so what do you do in this situation?
I would need to analyze which statutory scheme we're operating under, whether it's Government Code Section 1090, which means the board couldn't do it, or Political Reform Act, which means the board could do it, but Ms. Guzman would have to recuse herself, state the conflict, recuse herself, leave the room, let
Which
them.
is what she did.
Well, that's what she does.
But it may not fall under that category is what I mean to say.
Oh, you're saying cured. In this typo, all you're saying is it all happened already.
Right.
And does this fix it? So what we're saying is don't try to fix it after the fact. Do all this good stuff in advance.
Right, and I think that a court would find that this is a Government Code Section 1090 conflict, which is not curable.
Does that mean that everybody else can get 3 units overload except Frank?
No,
Nobody can get.
nobody. In this hypothetical where we're doing a blanket.
But the board never decides that. I think the dean decides.
Right, well, I can, make my own crazy rules. Sometimes
It's clear though, this is the exact right procedure going in when we know that there's going to be a faculty union negotiation item we should do all those steps, and we're good.
We are good.
Okay.
So the answer is yes,
The answer is no.
but isn't,
Let's just take the hypo off the table. What Eileen was referencing, Ann, was in her dialogue with us, her previous question. That answer no only applies to the previous questions as we were following along in her hypotheticals tonight.
Yeah, that is confusing.
And the reason this is, that we aren't cured here is because I believe a court or the Attorney General is going to find that this, change in overload is a contract of
But
employment.
it's the individual who has, you know, the conflict, states the conflict and recuses themselves before any of it is discussed.
If it's not a contract. So if we're saying it's not, that adding the overload is not a contract, it's a policy decision, then the Political Reform Act will apply. If we're saying that it's a contract between the district and each of the faculty members to take an additional 3-unit class, I think it's the Government Code Section 1090 conflict and not waivable, not curable.
Contracts become very important.
Correct.
Our contracts are applied to everybody across the board.
Right.
So we don't have the individual.
Okay.
contracts.
Oh, you're talking about individual
We have
contracts.
Blanket contracts that everybody benefits from.
Bargaining agreement.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
That was not clear.
Yes.
Okay. Brown Act in 9 minutes. I can do it. I'm tough. Particularly closed session issues. That's what I was asked to talk about. I can't just talk about closed session. I have to do a very brief thumbnail, bring us all up to speed. The Brown Act sets out the different types of meetings. Each type of meeting has its own agenda and notice requirements. A regular meeting is what you mostly have. Those agendas have to be posted 72 hours in advance, at least 72 hours in advance. There are several permissible types of meetings. There are special meetings, there are emergency meetings. We're not going to delve into that. Beware of serial meetings. The most common serial meeting problem I see is email. Reply all is not your friend. You know, it used to be a bigger issue, but we've gotten pretty savvy about this now. I can remember sitting at my computer watching email and watching a Brown Act violation happen before I could jump in and say, you all need to stop answering.
I have a question. Like when you send out an email, it'll
An update, like an update.
when I receive an email from you that you are sending, it could be your, you know, just, but it's addressed only to me, but it starts out, dear trustee, plural.
Yeah.
So when I get that from you, if I hit reply all, it just goes to you, right? Okay, so that I think is one way to avoid the email.
And it is.
Last time I didn't.
Oh, well, I
So what we can do now, and I don't know whether the technology is improved or we've just gotten smarter about it, is we send the email to ourselves and BCC all the board members. And that way, when you reply all, it only goes back to the sender and not to all your fellow trustees. So it's a little bit easier to manage, or maybe we've just gotten smarter. Yeah. So watch out for serial meetings. They can happen when you least expect it. There are agenda requirements. There are requirements for how you conduct the meeting. You have to have public comment. You have to have public comment before you go into closed session. Those kinds of things. And it also sets out the rights of the Brown Act also sets out the rights of the public. Closed sessions are permissible only under certain prescribed circumstances. The presumption is, the default position is some action should be considered or taken in open session. You have to have a specific statutory authority to go into closed session. And the list is longer than you think it is, but most of them don't apply to us. The big ones that you will see are most personnel matters, labor negotiations, giving direction to your negotiator, some parts of real property transactions, pending litigation, and student discipline. Those are the ones you are going to see most often. You are not going to see the multi-jurisdictional drug task force exception that often. There is one, believe it or not.
What personnel matters will not be closed session, because you're certain?
You don't have to put any personnel matter in a closed session. You do it because you want to protect the privacy of the people being considered. But if you look at your consent, I hate to pick on consent again, if you look at your consent schedule, your personnel schedule on the consent, there's a lot of personnel actions that you don't put in closed because they're routine.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Hiring so-and-so.
Yeah, so-and-so
Oh,
is the hiring or accept the resignation of, takes, sometimes moving probationary faculty members from contract to contract is done on the personnel consent.
Labor negotiation.
Labor negotiations, giving direction to your labor negotiator with a union or with unrepresented employees. That can be in closed session. Once you've set your closed session agenda and you've said we're going to be in closed session on A, B, C, D, and E, that's it. That's all you can discuss in closed session is A, B, C, D, and E. You can't say, well, E reminds me that I wanted to talk about F.
This is a person, so therefore.
Right. This is a person, therefore it's personnel. You also cannot, one of my colleagues said this once to a board, you can't go into closed session under threatened litigation just because everybody sues you all the time anyway. There are the pending litigation and anticipated litigation, there are specific requirements to go into closed session. One of which is that you have to be receiving advice from your lawyer. You can't just go into closed session to talk about a pending lawsuit. You have to be getting advice from your lawyer.
So is it okay to put something down that's appropriate for closed session, that you put it down but maybe don't get to it?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Sure, just like you would table something in the open session.
You could put it there because, like, if we have time, we might.
Yes.
Okay, so that's not a problem.
That's not
just, so it's better to put more on and don't get to it.
Within reason.
You can do a placeholder on your agenda for litigation if you have ongoing.
Litigation requires certain information, so if
Right,
there's a specific lawsuit, you can list that, yeah.
Yes.
It's an ongoing.
Right, but you can't just say
Right.
pending litigation.
Yeah.
It has to be.
Right, that can be specific.
Okay, questions about this? We're on the downhill slide, so we're going over. Yes?
Oh, I have a question on closed session, but do you have more on closed session?
I do a little bit, but
Yeah, do that, and then we'll.
There we go. No, that's the wrong way. Did I break it? Okay, I'm going in the, there we go. All right. Closed session meetings, generally you only have who in the room who you need for the decision. I've been in your closed sessions many, many times. You do a good job with this. You don't have everybody in for all items. You move people in and out as necessary. So I think you get that. Anybody who's not necessary should be excluded. The reason is there's no such thing as a sort of closed session. It's like being pregnant. It's binary. You're either having a closed session or you're not having a closed session. There's no such thing as a semi-session. Generally, you have to report out. Almost always you have to report out. You have to reconvene into open session and report if there was any action taken. Sometimes you don't take action. That's fine. Sometimes you want to say we gave directions. That's fine. We took no reportable actions. That's fine too. What you report depends on what you did. There are a couple of somewhat unusual circumstances where you defer the report. For instance, if you take action in closed session to non-reelect a probationary faculty member, that probationary faculty member has an appeal right. And the Brown Act specifically provides you don't report out until the appeal is exhausted. So in the case of a probationary faculty member, that appeal could take several months to hear because you have to get it scheduled. There's, they take a long time. So you could be taking action in February to non-reelect somebody, to release a probe and not report it out until December. That's even longer.
Does that apply to like a management employee?
It would be rare for a management employee to have an appeal right.
Okay.
It's the appeal right that triggers this deferred report. There are strict requirements not to disclose information from closed session. Confidential information is defined as the basis for why we're in closed session. The sanctions are pretty severe. We can get an injunction against somebody. We can refer a governing body member to the grand jury. We can discipline an employee who does this, who makes this kind of unauthorized closed session disclosure.
Is that a civil grand jury or a criminal grand jury?
You know, it is a crime. I'm not sure. I've never had to do it, thank God. So I'm not sure. Okay, Ann, you had a question, and I think I have like 30 seconds left.
Yeah, okay. Well, actually, I have a request, and it's not so much closed session, but one of our board policies, because we have new trustees and the 700 forms are coming up, but one of our board policies says that if any trustee needs assistance, that you will provide that.
Okay.
Are you aware of that?
No, but I'm happy to help.
Okay, so, but I just wanted to share that information. Okay, and I have a question I'd like to ask you afterwards, just something to help us.
Certainly. Anybody, anything else?
Well, are we in? Because we have another couple of things on our agenda that we wanted to talk about. And go 7?
No.
Okay.
So, are we done with Eileen? Move on to number 3.3, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just have a quick question, because I know this, how does the board, if they want to talk about, how they operate as a board, like meeting times or locations or their, the chancellor evaluation, well, chancellor evaluation can fall under personnel and evaluation exception, but just their own like board workings, how do they talk about those in a frank conversation, not on the dais?
So, okay, with that qualification, I think the only way you could do it is to put something on the agenda for board self-evaluation. And that would allow you all to discuss, you know, we're really not working together well. Here's what I think. I don't like our meeting time. If you don't want to have this conversation in open session, I don't like our meeting time. I want to talk about how we select. I wouldn't talk about the meeting time itself, but I want to talk about how we select meeting times.
That can be under board
Or
self-evaluation.
self-evaluation.
Well, how about if we want to talk about our Christmas party, where we're going to hold it, and who's going to bring what to the potluck? That's not allowed, right?
No, not in closed. That isn't board self-evaluation. You could do a couple of things with that. I'm trying.
Hey, couldn't you do an email on that?
Yeah, you could do you could absolutely.
That's something we're going to vote on.
Right, but I would do the same thing.
And then who caters it?
I would do the same thing though. I would, you know, send it to yourself and BCC everybody so that one person is acting as the coordinating and you're not, there's no threat of a serial meeting.
Okay.
So with conflict of interest, I'm concerned about protecting Leslie. She's on the Policies and Procedure Committee. When we talk about things with policies and procedures, a lot of it has to do with faculty. Is she going to get some kind of blowback from somebody saying, hey, well, you know, her husband's on the faculty, how come she's on the Policies Committee? I don't want her to get...
Some more than others. Certainly the HR chapter could have, there could be some issues there.
Next year we're going to be doing academic affairs.
That
everything to do with
instruction, right? But that could be issues.
Because like the accreditation standards require
require that we get as many different viewpoints as possible and perspectives. And so in a way, we're purging perspectives, because by not having one person on the board who even has, and you a little bit too, because you were a counselor who has a perspective on maybe what happens in the class or whatever. So we're
the spouse. I think that's, it's not that you can't have that they're experienced.
Well, are you saying she'd have to recuse herself and leave the dais every time we have a policy vote?
No.
Talking about the committee.
No, I was focused
And
on.
she can vote on them. So why can't she help formulate them?
Yeah.
I could, again, answering the question without answering the question. I mean, got this down, I think.
But she already told us she's really good.
I am. I'm conservative, especially on these kind of get you into
She
really bad
doesn't want
trouble.
to come visit you in jail.
Or
Well, I think that would,
I think, the one of the points that I've heard, and this has been very helpful, was we really have to monitor ourselves. I mean, that's really important. And it's not just, it's not just the individual that could be hurt by it, but the entire, the colleges.
Yeah.
That's always got to be our first thought.
So without answering the question, is it okay? Because I could see, we've got some faculty members who could say, that's not such a good idea. Her husband is in here, so she voted this way because it looks good for faculty. I don't want you to get massacred. I think she's got some good ideas. She's enthusiastic. She's young. She's new. Really young. Young as a board member.
let's put it this way, she's younger than me.
Eileen, would you prefer that since we're specific?
Yeah,
You would like to take this under advisement? And
I think so.
could do a
written?
I don't want to give you a
Right.
firm answer tonight.
Yeah.
I would want to,
Yeah.
I want to do some research on the exceptions or what
There you
I'm
go.
trying to run through, and they're just so detailed, I can't do them on my feet.
Okay.
Or even sitting down in a comfortable chair.
Okay.
Yes, in the dark.
All right, well, let's go on because I know Abe's going to have to leave. So we're on 3.3, times and topics for future study sessions. So we've got, you can see what's been proposed here.
And if I could, I'd like to
Please.
address the first one, the March 29th board retreat. Could I?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
of course.
This is, we have Chancellor Doug Houston and one of his board members was just the past president, who've been doing retreats around California and done a really excellent job. And so when I reached out to them, because I knew you guys were, interested in a retreat, I know I was interested in a retreat. Wednesday, the 29th of March, which is the 5th Wednesday, so there's no meeting scheduled, was the day that worked. So that would be like from 9 to 3. And what we were thinking is doing it in Oakville, be in the middle, and so that works for people.
On a Wednesday?
Yes, for Wednesday, from 9 to 3. Is that a problem?
I really don't know right now, so.
Okay, so it's the 5th Wednesday, so it's like a regular.
I know, but I have other interests I'm fishing, and I haven't got my schedule yet, so.
Okay.
So it'd be kind of a hit and miss for me. Unless it was like late 7 or something like that.
Okay, and then we have a proposed study session in April and May, enrollment management, one on safety.
Also with April will be a presentation by the Columbia College,
Okay.
sabbatical presentation.
That's-
For half hour.
Any more topics that we want to add for future studies? I'm interested in negotiations, but I think we're going to be able to do that in closed sessions when we have time. So we'll always agendize that.
The nursing program was talking to Jane about making the presentation.
Sure. We're also going to get on that tour too, but one of the things I know that was brought up, you guys have a process that you've used in the past for how to schedule the time, and Graciela can do that, where she would send out to you, sometimes and then whatever comes back to the most individuals, rather than doing it, on that Wednesday from 4:30 to 7.
That would be, I would like that, because
Okay.
when I saw this and everything was on a Wednesday and times and stuff, it's like, well, how did we arrive at that?
Yeah, it was my fault.
She was free.
It was my fault, yeah. I did it.
Bad Jane.
I know.
No, well, we agreed to it.
Well, I think the study sessions aren't mandatory anyway.
No, they're
No.
not. They're
But
nice.
it is a,
We
it's
try to
a
get-
great, I really
Right.
think they're great.
I think it brings everybody up to speed,
And I think
yeah.
the important thing, I mean, it's different than a board meeting. It is
Right.
an open meeting, but it is our study, your study session. And we
No, I-
like to have other people come. They want to, but it is the purpose of the board development.
And with 3 new board members, there's a lot to
Right.
we need to do. So,
Right.
and so, Michelle, did you want to say
I
something?
have a question, and it might be able to be handled with the chancellor, but I'm interested in the parameters for the presentation, because since you've shown interest in hearing from faculty presentations, there are faculty groups, and one is the nurses. The nurses are very interested. Also, the PE department, the football coach has a really interesting presentation prepared. So faculty are already contacting me.
Why don't you get those to me and I'll bring them to the board and we can.
Yeah.
So what I think we need though is, and I think that if you could maybe get to me and I could, send out to the whole faculty the parameters, how long, how.
I think what we had today would probably be it.
Okay, so how long, who, how should they apply? Should the names go to you? What kind of material should be presented? And so, if anything like that, if you could send that to me, I can get it out. Okay.
The ones that have
That sounds-
contacted me, I told them to contact their dean. And-
Well, have them contact me.
Yeah,
Because
okay.
then I can get it out to you guys and you can make decisions as to.
If you can send me that, I can get it out to the whole faculty.
Yeah.
Okay,
It was great.
sounds good.
Okay,
And
is there,
then James, did you reach out to Teresa and her staff to find out when we could schedule that?
Okay.
Yep.
Teresa?
Hers.
And can we
she's
schedule
right
it?
behind you.
Oh, I thought you left. Sorry, hello. Yeah. Well, I know that as closer we get to, the budget, it's busier for you folks. So, but I would like to get that presentation in.
So,
And then just the announcement.
And I want to hear
Then-
you.
yeah, this is an important one, that because for our next regular board meeting on March 8th, because Angie will
Her assistant
be doing, what's your sister's name? I forgot. Carrie, okay. Because you'll not be there and we want you to be there, so we're going to switch, and March 8th will be at this building.
Oh.
And April will be up at Columbia with
Okay.
big notes.
And
So
we're
that
trying-
is a change.
Yeah, we're trying to put something together so that we actually go from one state and do the visitation with
March
each
will
program.
be here.
Now, I know that I'm saying, so do we need to go early because we have a closed session up there before the board meeting?
No.
Yes.
You have to be
Yeah.
there by
At 3:30.
3:15. We start at 3:30. So
And
yes,
what
you have to leave
We're trying
early,
to set up John too, and I don't know if he'll be available. You've already actually seen a lot of comments, but we're gonna do the tour of programs and facilities. So we can have the deans and
Come
stuff.
down here to the board meeting?
No.
We're at Columbia
March?
on the 8th.
In
We'll do Columbia
In
then.
April,
In
March
April.
is
In
here.
April.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, everything for.
The March is here exactly the same. March is here exactly the same.
Yes.
April,
Yeah.
will be a tour.
Exactly.
Oh, in April. Not in March.
No.
Okay.
To make.
Okay.
Your
Thank you all for
closed
coming.
session in Columbia,
And
down here.
adjourned.
I have a request for it.
Sure.